day, very early in the morning, just as the sun is peeking up over the horizon, you see this scene. A group of men will be found walking out to a pen where there are many sheep kept in the pen. Perhaps 100 or so, maybe more. And these men take their positions and they begin to open the gate. And what follows appears to be total and utter chaos. You have 100 or more bleeding sheep rushing towards the gate. They're hungry, they want to get out. And they come out of the gate and raising the dust and bleeding. And each of the shepherds begins to call his own particular call. Calling his own sheep. And it looks like a total, complete wreck. You wonder, how in the world can anything come out of this? How can anything come out of this total chaotic scene? And yet, amazingly, considering how dumb sheep are, somehow they find their master. They find their shepherd. Somehow in all that noise, they recognize their shepherd's voice. And they follow. And you can imagine all the noise that was taking place on that first Palm Sunday. Jesus comes riding down the Mount of Olives, and the people who were anticipating his coming, pulling palm branches off the trees and rushing out to meet him and shouting and singing. It must have seemed pretty chaotic also. But it's just the beginning. As today is just the beginning of what we call Holy Week, where you will hear a lot of different voices during the week, and especially on that Holy Thursday and on that Good Friday. You will hear a lot of different voices speaking out on that week. In the midst of all of that, there's the voice of the shepherd. The voice of Jesus. You see, on that day, first of all, you have the voices of betrayal and denial. You have the voice of Judas, who goes to the chief priest and says, "What do you give me to turn him over to you?" You have the voices of the disciples, who in the upper room argue an argument they've been debating for 3 years now. Which one of us is the greatest in the kingdom? Just proving again how dense they were. You hear the voice of Peter, boasting above all of them, "I will never fall away." But then, just a few hours later, you hear that same Peter, that same voice saying, "I don't know the man." And you have hateful, angry voices. You have the voice of the chief priests and the council saying to Jesus, "Are you the Christ? Then you tell us." You have the voice of Pilate saying to Jesus again, "Are you the King of the Jews? You, this man in dirty, filthy rags, you're a king?" And you have the voice of Herod saying, "Come on, Christ, do a miracle for me. Pull a rabbit out of your hat. Show me I'm no fool. Walk across my swimming pool." And then you have the voice of the crowd Release Barabbas! Crucify him! Release Barabbas! Crucify this Jesus! And you have the voice of Pilate again, grudgingly handing Jesus over. A man he knows is innocent, but handing him over nonetheless to be crucified. All the voices of the passion. All the voices that were being spoken that day. And as they led Jesus up on the cross and they nail him to the cross, two more voices join in. The two men that were crucified with him, and we're told in Matthew's gospel that both of them were heaping abuse on Jesus. At least in the beginning. It kind of matched the voices of our times. The blasphemous, the unbelieving voices of this day and age. Oh, you know them. You hear them. There's the voice of the secularist who says, Jesus, he was just a man. There's the voice of the atheist who are growing in numbers in this day and age, becoming more and more boldly, who simply tell us, there is no God. Enjoy your life. Don't worry about it. There's no God. And then there's the voice of the skeptic. I need more proof. You know that person. You have that person probably in your life. I would believe, but I need more proof. You know that more people today, I saw this in an article yesterday, there are more people today in America who profess to have no religion than the number of those who profess to be either Catholic or Protestant. In other words, there are more people who say that they are not Christian than people who say they are Christian in America today. There's the voice of the sinner who, burdened down with his sins, buries his hands buries his face in his hands, but refuses to come to church because he says, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for God. And then there's the religious person who says, I am good enough. I do this. I serve in the church. I've served on all the boards. I taught Sunday school. I've been everything in the church. I am good enough. And then there's the spiritual person. We have a lot of those in America today. I don't need to go to church to be close to God. I'm close to God when I'm out in nature. I'm close to God when I walk about. And then there's the material believer. I would come to church, but I still got things to do. I'll be happy when I have a little bit more of, maybe a little bigger house, a little more money, a little more land. Then I'll be happy. Then maybe I'll see about this Jesus thing. These are the voices that are singing out, that are crying out in America today, that are drowning out, and this is the din and the noise that we face all the time, that people face all the time. Just like on Monday, Thursday, just like on Good Friday. Those voices compete. They compete with us. They compete for us. You know them. You hear them. Maybe you are them. I don't know. But they drowned out the sound and the voices But you know what? There was one voice on that Good Friday. There was the voice of faith, which came from the most unlikely person you would ever imagine. Came from a thief. Didn't come from the disciples. Didn't come from the women that followed Jesus. They all stood off at a distance. Didn't come from anybody in the crowd. None of the religious leaders. None of those who puffed themselves up to be Bible scholars. No. It comes from a thief. It comes from someone who admits that he is getting just what he deserves. And from this man, this broken man, this sinful man, we hear the voice of faith. Jesus, remember me when you go into your kingdom. And from Jesus, through all the noise, through all the din, through everything going on and swirling on around him, we hear the voice of Jesus speaking clearly and calling to us and saying, truly, you will be with me today in paradise. Do you hear the voice of Jesus now? Do you hear the voice of Jesus even today through all those voices of the skeptic and the atheist and the secularist, the materialist and the spiritual person? Amidst all of them, there's the voice of Jesus. There's the voice of Jesus speaking to you and to me. Listen. Listen to what he says. To you who are weary, he says, come to me, and I will give you rest. He says to you who are doubting, in no way will I send you away. In no way will I turn you aside. He says to those who are afraid, fear not. I have overcome the world. And he says to the sinful, your sins are forgiven, each and every one. And he says to the lost, I have come to seek that which was lost. I have come to seek you, and you are mine. And to the dying, and let's face it, we're all dying. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The voice of Jesus calling out today, even calling out today in America amidst all the noise, amidst all the anger and all the hate that we hear swirling all around us. But there's that sweet voice of our shepherd who still is calling to you and me today. Come to me. Trust me. Follow me. There was one last voice on that Good Friday that spoke out. Another very unlikely voice, but another voice of faith. I say unlikely because this would have been the last person in the world you would have thought. See, the Romans were pagans. The Romans despised the Jews and despised their religion, which made no sense to them. And yet here at the foot of the cross, you have one of the boldest confessions of faith that we read about in the Gospels. This man, seeing the way Jesus died, says, surely this man was the Son of God. See, this shows me that anyone can hear the voice of the shepherd. This shows me that the voice of the shepherd is already out there, and he's already preparing hearts, and he's already working in our hearts to open us up. He's working in you, and he's working in me, that we also, amidst all the racket and noise that we hear in this world today, that we also may hear his voice. That we may also hear his call, that we may also follow. For the voice of the shepherd is calling us now and speaking out to us all. Amen.